the things that led up to and culminated to why we're here today, and why this global macro economy looks the way it looks, and why we're so interdependent with different nations, and why, you know, the downfall of one potential superpower can take us all down. With that said, you know, there's some really incredible people on this panel that I'd like to make introductions to. You know, I think there was a few people that have been on panels previously. So Matt D'Souza, I know Marshall Long, Tron, you were on one as well. Tim, I'll pass it over to you. But for those who haven't been on, I think Marshall, if you could just make an introduction for the people, and then Matt and Tron, maybe a quicker introduction for the folks that just joined us, that'd be great.
Yeah, my name is Marshall Long. Thanks so much for having me on, by the way, guys. I've known Tron and Matt for a long time. Thanks so much to the folks over at Coin Genius. I like what you guys are doing. It's really cool. Thanks for putting this on. I think it's a great idea, especially the timing. But as far as me, I've been mining since 2010. Been a crypto nerd ever since then. Dabbled in all kinds of things from investing. I still do heavy mining stuff. Done a lot of work in China and across borders too. So I've seen a lot of bad stuff, seen a lot of good stuff, and yeah, we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, I'll keep it really simple. I run a digital currency hedge fund, a Bitcoin mining fund, another company called Blockware Solutions. We're kind of a service provider for miners. So you guys heard my bio before, so I'll pass it along to Tron.
Okay, so I'm a freedom advocate, miner, developer, currently lead dev for Ravencoin, worked for Medici Ventures, worked for T0, and big Bitcoin fan.
That would be a good reason for you to be on this panel, Tron.
Yeah.
All right, so the title of this panel is Why Bitcoin is Perfectly Positioned to Thrive. And so I guess I'll start off by saying, are we at the beginning of another wave of adoption? It seems that the pieces that are required to allow that to happen may be in place now where they weren't in times gone by. The second question would be the halving and how that perceived scarcity will drive interest to Bitcoin, especially because it'll be more difficult to get one. And then we can look at whether or not the Lightning Network, the promise to provide greater utility for settlement and means of exchange is going to make a difference as well. So with that said, Marshall, you've not been on a panel before. I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. I can say that in a bigger picture, now is the perfect time for Bitcoin. You know, it is started around the genesis of the last kind of issues we had in the traditional financial sector. And now everything that most of us thought was already happening is happening. So what's interesting is Bitcoin is now getting the chance to shine. And I mean, so far so good. You're seeing a nice divergence from traditional equities, that kind of stuff. That's exciting. The halving coming up is interesting. Although in my opinion, it doesn't generally follow any kind of rational thought, because both halvings I've been a part of, right at the halving, the price goes down for some reason for a couple of months and then it goes back up. So I expect to see the same kind of thing here. So yeah, I think Bitcoin has quantitative hardening as opposed to just money printer. And I think it's very easy to see the benefit and use case of Bitcoin right now. So
yeah, I can just quickly jump into it and kind of talk about our thesis as a fund, dual funds. We look to capture the opportunity through mining as well as holding the underlying. I think Marshall hit on a couple great points. To us, 2008 really spawned Bitcoin and gave reason for the technology to be created. We believe 2020 is going to be, the 2020 crisis is going to be the event that starts to stimulate demand and acceptance. We're truly market historians, and it's really about how markets work. To us, you don't need to get full blown adoption for to have an exceptional market event. There's key components that really prime Bitcoin to position to thrive and really experience a great bull market. So with what's going on with the global macro right now, many people are going to be upset. A lot of people don't like the Fed printing, and what that does is people look at Bitcoin and see this almost as this parallel financial system, where rather than printing, everything is dictated by code. The monetary policy is dictated by code. There's quantitative hardening rather than printing that's dictated by the Federal Reserve or central banks. So we think the 2020 crisis is positioning us for something special, and that's going to create adoption. And most importantly, it's really about how markets work. Bitcoin is a pebble. It's 120 billion market cap. That's a third of Facebook's market cap. It's a tenth of gold, and it's like a percent of pension money. So when you get a tiny little market, you get a secondary liquid market because we have trades, and then you infuse speculators. We think Bitcoin is primed to really have a great parabolic bull market because people are going to start to be able to envision the possibilities of Bitcoin getting adopted because of what's going on right now with the 2020 crisis. So that's really what we're excited about. And when you get speculators to start envision all of that coming to fruition, that's really how you get new bull markets. It's halving is going to improve the supply side economics, but what's going on with the 2020 crisis, that improves the sentiment and the demand side economics. So I want to keep that as short as possible and let someone else speak.
Tron?
So I'm going to agree with both my fellow panelists on that. I learned about crypto because of the Cyprus, where they basically closed the bank doors and gave them a haircut. It made you think about money. And the reason that Bitcoin kind of came to the fore was people were like, this is the solution. This is the solution to basically, banks basically saying we own your money instead of feeling like you've deposited your money. I think the fact that they can print money and kind of issue it into the market, it hurts savers. That's really where the value comes from. The first person to spend it gets the real value before the inflation hits. I think on the halving, it'll be interesting even without this COVID thing. It'll be the first time that the inflationary part of Bitcoin was going to drop below the 2% Federal Reserve inflation level, which was going to be interesting, independent of this printing money thing. I think when you think about money and saving money in a bank account and having that devalue as they just print money because it takes it out of the savers, you have to think about where to put it. So you either put it in companies that can earn and keep up with it, or in something that will hold the value. And I think Bitcoin is among those candidates. So I think it'll thrive.
I agree. I mean, it's been perceived, or it is being perceived, as a store of wealth. It's being perceived as a hedge, although it's got to decouple before it becomes a true hedge. I guess another one of the questions that I've been thinking about is it Bitcoin that is really going to soar? Is it one of the forks of Bitcoin that is going to soar? Does anybody have an opinion on that?
I think it's absolutely going to be Bitcoin. I mean, anyone I think we could have a short discussion on that one. I'd say Bitcoin for sure.
All right, so I think
I think it's going to be Ravencoin. That's just my personal opinion.
All right, who said that? That's awesome.
Well, I mean, Bitcoin is what, 60% of the marketplace, and then you add the Bitcoin forks, it's 86% of the marketplace, right? So, I mean, it was worthy of at least an ask.
92%, but who's counting? Can I interject? I'll give you. I'm not a Bitcoin maximist. I actually have 0 Bitcoins, well, under 1. And I'll tell you why it's going to thrive. And unless they change the system, the pairing mechanism, why essentially everything else will fall. And here's the reason why, at least in my opinion. You have all these new projects coming to market. I mean, Bitcoin was the first, so number 2 through whatever comes in 10 years. But their major pairing is in Bitcoin. So yes, I agree that one needs to have a Bitcoin to get involved in project A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But when project C comes along, third project and fourth and fifth, now there's just a smaller, I guess, pool of resources for them to get, because the market dominance, the way it is, it can't go over 50%. Otherwise, in theory, and I'm not an economic person, I'm more of a capital markets fund manager type, but theoretically, if there's Bitcoin dominance over 50%, under 50%, then it's broken, because everyone couldn't redeem for their Bitcoin theoretically. Now, in real life, the prices would go down, but I see it as the biggest problem, that Bitcoin is, every other project is tethered to Bitcoin. What Bitcoin price are you worth? 10 Satoshi, 1,000 Satoshi, 1,000,000 Satoshi? But what's Bitcoin tethered to? Well, it's tethered to Tether and USD, which is seemingly, we can come out with a new stable coin every day. And that's the problem. And that's why it will thrive. It doesn't mean that everything else won't do well. I hope that every other project does well, because I hold many of them. But at this rate, it runs out quickly.
I see Tron chomping at the bit. So, Tron, do you have a comment there?
I do. So I watched this for a little while. I think when Bitcoin goes on just a major run, people go, well, it can't double from there and that kind of thing, and it tends to flow out into the alts. So that's kind of what I think will happen again. If it goes on a tear, it goes to 20,000, 30,000, and it very well could. But I think some of that money will be taken out and flow into the alts. You know, stuff that people say, hey, this one could double, quadruple. Whereas they won't believe that from $30,000 to the quadruple and triple and that kind of thing. So that seemed to be what happened kind of over the, from the 2013 to now. And you watch, the shift.
The difference, I think, now, if you look at historically, right, and when the halvings come and historically where you've got spikes, what you have now that's different is institutional playground. Now you have futures, and now you have, the big money people coming in here and arguably manipulating this in ways that it was never manipulated before. So I think that we're going to see some traps coming up. I think we're going to see spikes that are initiated by people who are playing those markets. Anybody have an opinion on that?
Kind of backing up to what Steven was saying, you're kind of analyzing trading volume, and trading volume isn't as reflective. It's really about who's holding all the Bitcoin, and a majority of that Bitcoin is not on the exchanges. So when you have algorithms just trading and churning, day trading, that's just creating a lot of value, but that's not the majority of the Bitcoin. So I think that's what should be assessed: who has a lot of the Bitcoin, who's holding it, and what direction is this going? It's going in digital gold. So what percentage of Bitcoin is being held and not moving? I think whatever I think we've seen recently, it's like 60% of wallets are just holding their Bitcoin. So we're seeing properties of gold. You don't buy $200,000 worth of gold, these massive bricks, and move it around. It sits in a vault for years. You pay insurance. There's a carry on it. And that's what a hedge is. So when you see Bitcoin and you start seeing it not moving and just sitting in people's addresses, well, that's digital gold. And that's important.
So there's a stat that, if you folks don't know, called coin days destroyed. And a coin day is basically the amount. It's a 1 day, one coin has not moved in that address. So if you see, there are charts. I think blockchain.info had a chart at one point. I don't know who else does. But basically, that's a really interesting one that I like to look at frequently, where if you see that a lot of coin days have been destroyed, that means that a lot of coins are moving, or a lot of very old coins are moving. And that's always interesting to kind of gauge what's the market sentiment like, because I know me personally, I've not traded Bitcoin that I've mined on an exchange for years. All my stuff is OTC. Most other people who mine do their stuff OTC. All large institutions do their stuff OTC. So these dark pools are where most of the liquidity is.
And on top of that, like really great points. We're looking at where is Bitcoin going, right? This is a technology in its infancy, and we're trying to get it to a specific point, which I think is digital gold. And when you see a majority of the network or a great percentage just holding their Bitcoin, that's properties of digital gold. That's how you compete. That's several users that are actually, that's not speculation. That's adoption. That's what's important. So, I think we started off with the conversation of BSV and BCH. Well, what are their percentages? It's probably significantly less. It's just being used as speculation. It's not people viewing it as this ecosystem that they want to support, nor do they have conviction in it being digital gold. When Bitcoin's at, so that's my point on that.
Gotcha. Alex Lightman visited us. I mean, you want to chime in there, Alex?
Sure. I guess I'll just start with what I was going to say. I haven't heard every word that's been said in the session, but I think Bitcoin is perfectly positioned for four main reasons. The first is that it has known supply. We know exactly how much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We know what the supply is. We know. We also have. Secondly, I don't know if you said it, but I would be shocked if people didn't say it. We have the halvening coming up in a month, and so we're going to go from 12.5 Bitcoin coming out about on average every 10 minutes to 6.25. So our emission rate is going to drop in half. And at the same time that the emission rate of the dollar is going up by an unknown amount, but we're creating dollars like never before in history. We're creating units of currency that have been equaled, as far as I know, only by two countries. Weimar Republic, Germany, when it took a wheelbarrow of cash to Deutschmarks to buy an egg, and Zimbabwe. And that's why Washington is called Harare on the Potomac. And I've seen several people who are trillionaires in Zimbabwe currency. So I think that people are going to want to say, wait a minute, we have something where we know how many Bitcoin there are. Let's say it's 18 million for sake of this. There can only be just under 21 million. So only 3 million left. I keep on having these downside surprises on the dollar supply. And with Bitcoin, one of the things that I'm shocked is not more in the news is that there's the upside surprise, because most people are dumbasses and they've lost a lot of their Bitcoin. And a lot of the early Bitcoin is sitting in flash drives and hard drives that have gone to the dumpster, have been thrown away.
Yep.
And so, I mean, I would be really shocked if there are more than 12 million Bitcoin, and there might be as few as 9 million. I mean, I don't know what the exact number is, but I think that, so I think that also Bitcoin has two other things which are just spectacular. It's the best investment return looked at on a decade basis of the last century. And it also has never been, the Bitcoin blockchain has never been breached, when every single government has been hacked and is being hacked over and over again. So best investment return of the last decade, best security, best supply to emission ratio of anything. These things are amazing. And then we have the fact that it's just under $7,000 as this session is going, and it's hit as high as 21,000. And on top of that, as I said in a previous panel, you have the supply shock, the demand shock, the market shock, and you have the basically you have this US dollar liquidity crisis around the world. And so I just don't think it's going to take very much for two countries to go, shit, I can't pay for you for my oil, your oil in dollars. I can't pay for your corn in dollars, but I can pay you in Bitcoin. And then you can just go liquidate it on the market in seconds, and we can transfer it back and forth in seconds for almost nothing.
Hey.
And so it doesn't take very much for Bitcoin to have greater liquidity and to just to moon again.
Alex, I'm looking at some of the comments in the chat, and it was mentioned by Marshall that we've rolled the chain back 3 times in the course of Bitcoin's history.
Okay.
Right. So
for 45 minutes, I don't know that, but did people actually steal Bitcoin?
Yeah, none of that was nefarious. to my
Yeah, there's
to my
no, but the,
to Alex's
you,
point, none of
Yeah,
that was
it,
nefarious.
there's
Right.
nothing stolen.
Just
There,
being credited.
there are adjustments, but there's nothing that was stolen. Nobody's been
Right.
able to go in and do Ocean's 11 on Bitcoin and steal it.
I got you. All right, we're going to be running low on time.
Can I say
here,
something real
guys.
quick?
Go ahead, Steve.
All right, so I guess I've been in markets for 20 years, not, I guess, blockchain for like 4. People often ask me, well, what's your call? Is it going up or down? And I say sometimes, what if it's after this parabolic rise? What if it's just flat? You know, being flat this year when equities are down 30%, that's good, right? I mean, like if Bitcoin was $7,000 in a year from now, would anyone say that's a bad bet considering what it did? So I guess why I believe that Bitcoin will thrive is because you have new projects coming and they're tied to Bitcoin. So as Tron kind of alluded to, if Bitcoin goes to whatever, doubles, 14,000, all the other projects trading with it because of the way we look at it increase in value, correct? I mean, everyone agrees that if Bitcoin goes up, then just the US dollar part. So I would ask this to Tron, since you're involved in a project, how do you feel about like the destiny, or any of you guys, the destiny of many projects is based on Bitcoin's movement because it needs to go up over time for more, I guess, organizations to be able to come to the market.
All right, so let's get some closing comments because we are running out of time. You're first, Tron.
Yeah, I think Bitcoin will go up. I think DEX will go up. Well, so Bitcoin is an anchor for this whole thing. I'm very pro Bitcoin, but I don't think the other ones are going away, and I don't think they're all going to consolidate one, which I hear every once in a while.
Got it, Matt.
That's it. Yeah, we're really excited about Bitcoin. Obviously, I think what's going on with the global macro, coupled with halving, it's a great time to be positioned. So we're just doing a lot of sitting.
Indeed. How about you, Marshall?
I will reiterate my thesis for the past half decade or more since I started learning about these idiots. Banks are Ponzi schemes run by morons, and Bitcoin is your hedge against the morons. There you go.
Nice. Alex?
Yeah, I'll just jump and agree with Marshall and say he's called them banks
Marshall.
Idiots. Marshall said they're idiots run by morons. And I would add to that, who now have, as of March 26, no reserve requirements. Now, how the fuck do you have a banking system with no reserve requirements? That's the whole point. Like, fractional reserve banking is no longer fractional reserve banking, because what happens when you divide by 0? You know,
it's YOLO banking at this point.
So it's the whole thing is just entirely based on how much you trust the Trump administration and, you know, whether it feels like who it feels like giving money to. And the biggest sign to me of corruption is this $450 billion chunk, which is going to be increased, which has no oversight.
No oversight.
Trump has been basically Game of Thrones killing everybody who is supposed to be an inspector over the money. So if you're but this is sort of to soften them up, because if you're an inspector and you're looking at how the money is spent, and you've seen that everybody else was fired even before they did anything, even before they did any oversight, it's called a chilling effect. So basically what we have right now is a textbook case that is only described perfectly in the book Why Nations Fail. And Why Nations Fail says that when the extractive class gets their claws on all the money, and you cannot stop them, there are no filters, there are no barriers, there's no checks and balances to the extractive class, your nation is fucked and it fails. And that's where we're going. And one other thing is that Bitcoin is global money. Because of this weird mysteriousness about who the founder is, we can all think that, well, it's not an American thing, even though it is. It's not, Japanese think it's Japanese. It's basically denationalized money. And that's what Friedrich Hayek is saying that we want. he basically said really well that that day will be so wonderful when we can have money that's based just on market forces and not based on these political instruments called banks and nationalism, without this stench of nationalism.
Indeed, Alex, and I'm gonna have to end it there because we're running out of time. But I think as a cumulative review, Bitcoin thrives.
Correct.
There we go.
Well said.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Panel.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, in the
Thank you.
effort to keep things moving forward, obviously very interesting conversation. Thanks again to everybody. I personally think Bitcoin is perfectly positioned to thrive for a number of different reasons, including some of the ones mentioned there. Once again, if you'd like to join our Discord and talk to a lot of people that are on these panels, just go to coingenius.ai and take a look at that. And take a look at all the media. We'll also be posting all the recordings of this conference and split it out, especially the ones that actually worked. I know we've had quite a few technical issues, so